Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to be covering Chapter 8, an introduction to metabolism. Now, the first part of this first part video for Chapter 8 is going to be all about energy and how work, energy and work, and fueling cellular processes, really. So, there are some things in this part of the chapter that they are in the PowerPoint, but I'm not going to focus too much in the video. And so because I'm not going to focus that much in the video, you're not really necessary. I'm not really going to ask you that many questions about this uh, on the exam. I'm not going to ask you any questions about spontaneity and the energy equations. So when we get to that, I'll tell you what will be uh, included or what would not be included on your exam. So for this chapter, we're going to be looking at the energy and the laws of thermodynamics and how do that relates to biological processes. Energy is used by living things um, constantly. We are using energy all the time. Your cells are using energy to fuel all of the chemical reactions that occur within your body. So, energy used by living things demonstrates the first law of thermodynamics, and that energy can be transferred or transformed, but it cannot be created or destroyed. The conversion of energy to thermal energy, which is released as heat by living organisms, demonstrates the second law of thermodynamics, and that every energy transfer or transformation increases the entropy. Entropy is just, in my opinion, a fancy word for chaos of the universe. So, we're going to review the laws of thermodynamics and how energy travels through systems. So, the first concept we're going to go over is an organism's metabolism transforms matter and energy. Metabolism is the totality of an organism's chemical reactions. It is important that we know what metabolism is. It's an emergent property of life. It arises from the orderly interactions between molecules. Metabolism is defined by metabolic pathways. In a metabolic pathway, a specific molecule is altered in a series of steps and it creates a product. So you can have one enzyme that starts in a chemical reaction to create a product, which is then used by a second enzyme to do another chemical reaction, creates a product. And then eventually you'll keep doing this until you get to the product that you want or need in your system. There are several different metabolic pathways that exist that are super important in the metabolism of organisms, which we'll cover some of those, for example, in cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So, catabolic pathways are pathways that release energy by breaking down complex molecules into simpler compounds. So, in other words, you can think of catabolic pathways as our digestion of food products. Cellular respiration is the breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen, and it's an example of a pathway of metabolism. Catabolic pathways, the breaking down of complex molecules into simpler compounds, represents one half of your metabolic um, uh, metabolism, and so the other one is anabolic pathways, the opposite in that where you build complex molecules from simpler ones. And so, for example, the synthesis of protein from amino acids is an anabolic pathway. So the creation of, for example, proteins within the body are anabolic pathways. Catabolic and anabolic pathways create the metabolism of a cell or of an organism. Catabolic pathways are described as downhill reactions, whereas anabolic pathways are considered uphill. Living things use energy released from the downhill to power the uphill reactions that happen within the cells. And so, bioenergetics is the study of how energy flows through living organisms. So, then the question is, what is energy? Energy is the capacity to cause change, and it can be used to do work. If you're moving matter against opposing forces, such as gravity and friction, then you are doing work. Energy can exist in various forms. So, living cells must transform energy from one form to another to do the work of life. And so, your cells are constantly converting, for example, chemical energy into other forms of structures or other chemical energy, or eventually energy is being lost in the form of heat. Now, let's go over the types of energy, which we've reviewed this already once before. But kinetic energy is energy that's associated with motion. Moving objects perform work by imparting motion to other matter. For example, water gushing through a dam can turn the turbines, creating electrical energy. That's just an example. Thermal energy is the kinetic energy associated with random movement of atoms and molecules. Thermal energy is transferred from one object to another and we measure thermal energy in the form of heat. So, light is another type of energy that can be harnessed to do work, such as photosynthesis. Now, so those are kinetic energies. Potential energy is energy that matter possesses because of its location or structure. For example, the water behind a dam possesses energy because it's above sea level and will want to flow downwards. And molecules possesses energy due to the arrangement of the electrons in the bonds between their atoms. So they have potential energy as well. Now, chemical energy is a form of potential energy available for release in a chemical reaction. So, complex molecules such as glucose are high in chemical energy because energy is released as they are broken down to simpler products. If we think about it, so plants will convert solar or light energy into the creation of organic molecules like glucose. Those glucose molecules now contain what we consider chemical energy. So, a plant will, for example, we all love strawberries. A plant will convert and store all this chemical energy in the form of strawberries, a fruit. And say, for example, humans or other animals will come along and we love to eat those fruits. We love to eat strawberry. And so we are consuming chemical energy, and then our bodies will digest it catabolically to create, to release the energy that is in the bonds and for use in our chemical reactions in our body. Energy can be converted from one form to another. For example, and sometimes it's very easy. The diver here has more potential energy on the platform than in the water. So just standing on the diving board, he has a lot of potential energy. That potential energy can easily be converted to kinetic energy if he just decides to dive off the diving board. Now, diving off the diving board, creating motion, converts that potential energy into kinetic energy, and he now has the ability to jump or land in the water. Unfortunately, once you land back in the water, uh, you have less potential energy in the water than on the platform. And so you have to convert that potential, all that excess energy into kinetic energy to move or to swim back towards the diving board. And so energy transfer and conversion of energy happens, and it can happen quite easily. But once again, energy is not created or destroyed, it's just transferred. So that takes us to the first law of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is the study of energy transformations in a collection of matter. Um, and in an isolated system, such as the liquid in a thermos bottle, is unable to exchange energy or matter with its surroundings, only with the objects that are inside the thermos. So, in an open system, energy and matter can be transferred between the system and its surroundings. Organisms are open systems. They are able to absorb energy from light or food and to release heat and metabolic waste, such as CO2, into the surroundings. So, according to the first law of thermodynamics, energy of the universe is constant, but it can be transferred and transformed. It's also called the principle of conservation of energy. Animals or life indicates the first law of thermodynamics, in that as organisms to survive, if we're talking about animals, for example, consumers, the bear in this example, to survive must be able to eat. So it's going to consume chemical energy in the form of food. Now, the second law of thermodynamics states that uh, for every energy or transformation of energy, it increases the entropy or the chaos of the universe. Entropy is a measure of molecular disorder or randomness. So I always use the example, do you know that when you have to clean up your bedroom, it's so much easier to make a mess than it is to clean it up. So cleaning up your bedroom takes a lot more, it feels like it takes a lot more energy than it would to create a mess. And that's because there's a natural order for in the universe for things to go into disorder. Um, and so the second law of dynamics is also demonstrated in the bear that once he consumed the energy in the form of food, that is then not created or destroyed. It can be transferred though, or transformed. And so the bear would then use the chemical energy from its food to fuel all the processes that are needed within its body. Um, Releasing carbon dioxide in water, for example, adds disorder into the universe. It allows for it to move, creating disorder, and the release of heat creates disorder. So, living organisms increase the disorder of their surroundings through their metabolism. However, life, biological life, and structure is the fighting of the disorder. Cells, biological life, is always trying to keep things in order, and it takes energy and everything to keep it in order. So cells create ordered structures from less organized starting materials. For example, simple molecules are ordered into amino acids, which are then arranged into highly complex polypeptides. Complex ordered structures are also produced from simpler starting materials at the organismal level. And so, for example, the glass sponge will build this very intricate structure. And if you study the geometries of the glass sponge silica body, it's very fascinating in how it's able to build this structure. And humans, we have learned that we can copy the animal structures. We do that quite regularly. I don't know if it's true or not. The other example would be the um, how the Japanese built the Tokyo subway system out of the slime mold, the experiment that they conducted. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it's a fascinating story if it is. To increase the order um, within living systems, it's balanced by the catabolic breakdown of organized forms of matter, releasing heat in small molecules. So, at a large scale, energy flows into ecosystems as light and exit as heat. And so, the evolution of complex organisms from simpler ancestors does not violate the second law. Um, Entropy may decrease in a particular system, such as an organism, as long as the total entropy of the system and surroundings continues to increase. So, in other words, um, biological life, or your body, for example, is a very complex, orderly um, structure compared to the surroundings, but we still produce heat. We still use energy and create more chaos around us. But the order that is used to build our bodies is completely separated from the second law of thermodynamics. So, the free energy change of a reaction tells us whether or not the reaction occurs spontaneously. So, in this section here, I'm just going to review some terminology. For example, free energy is the portion of a system's energy that can do work when temperature and pressure are uniform throughout the system, such as in a living cell. So here's an equation for the change in free energy. You guys are not responsible for learning this equation, but just know that we can measure the free energy in a system. And because we can measure the free energy, we can determine if it's negative or positive. And if it's negative, it usually means that there's it's a spontaneous process. And if it's zero or positive, it's non-spontaneous processes. Every spontaneous process decreases the system's free energy. Spontaneous processes can be harnessed by the cell to do work. Okay. I'm not worried about, once again, free energy again. You guys are more than welcome to read through this. I'm not worried about that. But this is just showing you that um, with more free energy, things are less stable, but they have a greater work capacity. And so, in a spontaneous change, for example, the diver jumping off the diving board, it you now have less free energy, but you're more stable, and but you have a less work capacity. And so, equilibrium, the point at which the forward and reverse reactions occur at the same rate, describes a state of maximum stability. Um, So systems never spontaneously move away from equilibrium, and this is important if we wanted to go over cellular function. And so the concept of free energy can be applied to chemistry of life. It helps to explain the types of reactions that occur in metabolism. Chemical reactions can be classified based on their free energy changes. So in an exergonic reaction, where you will have a loss of energy, there's a net release of free energy into the surroundings. In dergonic reactions, you absorb energy from your surroundings. Uh, so, in exergonic reactions, the products store less free energy than the reactants. So, let's go over this in this diagram. So, if you have reactants in a system, to create a product in an exergonic reaction, they release energy but also create a product. Um, so why is this important? Because some processes that we're going to learn about are exergonic. They release energy so that it creates the ability, um, you can create products and also release energy in the process. When we cover cellular respiration and photosynthesis, it helps explain how energy is stored in the bonds. Breaking bonds during a chemical reaction does not release energy, it requires energy. If the products of a lower free energy of than the reactants. Potential energy is released when new bonds are formed after the original bonds break. So the opposite is true in endergonic reactions, in that the products store more free energy than the reactants. So the reactants require an input of energy to create products, um, creating endergonic reactions. So an example is in photosynthesis. The input of energy into reactants creates products that have a lot more energy stored in their chemical bonds. This is essentially how photosynthesis works. So, learning about exergonic and endergonic reactions and how they are necessary for energy exchange is important, but overall, an equilibrium in a system, um, and with their metabolism, they're able to do work. Reactions in a closed system are not able to continuously do work. So in a closed system, like for example here, um, if we just say water turbines, the water turbine will continue to run and create power until the water reaches an equilibrium. So in closed systems, eventually you're going to run out of energy. You're going to reach equilibrium, and there's no more endergonic or exergonic reactions that are able to be produced. So the system will shut down. Luckily enough, biological life is not a closed system. Life is Biological life is an open system. Chemical reactions of metabolism are reversible but never reach equilibrium in a living cell. This is one of the defining features of life. So, like an open hydroelectric system, cells allow materials to flow in and out, and the flow of materials prevents metabolic equilibrium. So, cells are continually able to do work. So, in an open hydroelectric system, there's going to be a continuous supply of things into the system. For example, if you're talking about the cell, there's going to be a continuous supply of solutes and chemicals entering in the system, for example, through the plasma membrane, and it's constantly going to be able to do work. And like a multi step open hydroelectric system, catabolic pathways in a cell releases free energy in a series of reactions. And so of um, a steady inflow of materials and energy means that equilibrium is never reached. So the cell is more like a multi-step open hydroelectric system, um, in that way. Now, it is important that you guys know about exergonic and endergonic reactions. I know I went through that very fast and skipped over some stuff, but I really want you to learn the terminology of exergonic and endergonic reactions, and that exergonic is a reaction in where you're losing some energy, and endergonic is in where you're gaining some energy. Those are going to be super important when we cover chapters 9 and 10. And so that concludes the first video for this chapter. And when we return, we will continue with learning about ATP.